Hi, and welcome to the Art of Film Funding. I'm your co-host, Claire Papin, along with writer-producer Carol Dean, author of the best-selling book, The Art of Film Funding, and host of this show. Carol is the president of From the Heart Productions, a nonprofit organization that has supported filmmakers with the Roy W. Dean Grant, fiscal sponsorship, education, and resources for over 30 years. Carol also teaches the Learn Producing class. Each class features an industry expert guest instructor and is designed to give the information, guidance, and support to become a successful producer. You can learn more about this class and all of From the Heart Productions offerings at FromTheHeartProductions.com. So glad you could join us on the Art of Film Funding podcast. I'm Claire Papin here with my co-host Carol Dean, and today we have a truly exceptional guest, Jon Reiss. Jon is widely recognized as one of the leading minds in film distribution and marketing. He's the author of the seminal book, Think Outside the Box Office, and the founder of 8 Above, a company dedicated to building audiences and designing innovative release strategies for independent films. Over the years, Jon has worked with hundreds of filmmakers and organizations worldwide, including the Gotham, IDA, Film Independent, and Screen Australia. His work spans consulting, theatrical distribution, and his groundbreaking distribution lab, where he trains filmmakers to navigate today's rapidly evolving marketplace. He also writes one of the most insightful Substacks on film distribution, and today's attendees will receive a free 6-month subscription, giving access to valuable case studies and industry tools, including his highly requested platform comparison sheet. Jon has been at the forefront of independent film for decades, from his early days documenting punk icons like Iggy Pop and Black Flag, to pioneering grassroots distribution models that are still influencing the industry today. Today, we're diving deep into what it really takes to get your film seen and how to survive and succeed in a very challenging distribution landscape. And Carol, I know you are a big fan of Jon.
Yes, I have been for a long time, Claire. He's a genius in the distribution world, and we really thank you, Jon, for joining us.
Well, thank you, Carol. I'm also a big fan of yours. And how could I not be a fan of someone who also always calls me a genius? But you do so much for the community, Carol. It's greatly appreciated. And I am often, engaging with people that follow you. So.
Oh, good to hear. Thank you, Jon. So, you've been at the forefront of distribution for decades. So, how would you describe the current distribution landscape for independent filmmakers?
Challenging, but hopeful. Let's put it that way.
Good.
It is probably one of the more challenging times for film distribution. I got involved in helping other filmmakers after the market collapsed in '07, and it's now collapsed again. But in a sense, it hasn't really collapsed this time. It's been more taken over by a few media conglomerates. And so it makes it, while on the one hand, there are more and more tools to engage audiences, and there's more and more tools to do direct to fan distribution and to build audiences for not only one film, but for a career. Those tools didn't exist as robustly 15 years ago. It is still monetarily challenging because most of the money is being extracted by 5 large corporations that you're all very aware of, and who used to contribute back to the ecosystem in terms of acquisitions, which then helped funders, which created this, somewhat virtuous circle between film financing and distribution, and that's become disrupted. So that's, I always talk about having a singular goal for your distribution, and that's money, change the world, career, or audience, one of those four. And money is the most challenging these days. There's lots of techniques for films to help change the world. There's techniques to develop audience, although that's also challenging because not only are the global streaming platforms using techniques to control audience attention, but also the large social companies such as Meta are doing the same. So it's a very competitive landscape. So that's it. That's why it takes a lot of forethought and acknowledgement from filmmakers to essentially survive in today's landscape.
Yes, because there are too many windows of engagement between YouTube and on, John, the games, everybody wants your time.
Yeah, that's why yes, there's so much content. We're definitely in an age of abundance, and not just an abundance of film, but an abundance of social media content, books, music, etc. So it's for audiences, it's not just a matter of if they'll give you money for what you are offering, but if they'll give you their time, sorry, if they'll give you their time for what you you're offering, whether they'll give you that 90 minutes for watching a feature film when there's so much else available to them.
Yes, this is very important. So let's get into why it's important for filmmakers to start thinking about distribution at the inception of their project.
Well, I think I've been saying this for many years. I'm also a filmmaker, so I understand at the inception, some people don't want to think about audience; they just want to be creative, etc. But after you write that script, you should evaluate, what the market potential is and how you're going to distribute and market that film, because it doesn't really exist now where someone's going to come along and say, "Oh, I love your project, and here's a check, and I'm gonna make all your dreams come true." That almost never really truly existed, but it did exist for some filmmakers, and now maybe happens for 0.001% of filmmakers. So
Right.
the other 99.99% of filmmakers need to make a plan. And I am finally seeing, after saying this for 15 plus years, that filmmakers are finally getting it. So we're going to talk about my distribution lab in a bit, but in the current fiction section of the distribution lab, 6 of the projects are in the script stage. So
Ah,
they're recognizing that they need to know distribution and marketing. They know that their funders are asking what is the distribution and marketing plan. So that's the first thing. So they know they need a solid plan to convince or talk to funders, or not just convince, but to engage with funders about what the plans are for the film. But also, there are things that you can do from early on that will help you distribute and market your film later. There's content that you can create. There's some films are now engaging audiences very early on and developing an audience over time, et cetera. And those techniques exist, and there are a lot of work, but it is possible, and filmmakers are doing this.
amazing. I'm so happy to hear that because that's what it's the thought. Oh, I want to make this film. Are you prepared for 6 years for a documentary? Yes. Okay. Then who's your market? That should be your next question. And I'm so happy to hear filmmakers are coming to you early. So really, how should filmmakers approach budgeting for distribution and marketing?
Do it early. So as an overall approach, I think look at it this way. If you don't budget for distribution and marketing at inception, the universe doesn't know you need the money, right? So at the very least, create that budget so that, I'm lived in California nearly all my life. I live in New York now, but it's that kind of manifesting thing. Even if you don't believe, I do feel that there's some sort of sense that okay, so if you don't believe in manifesting and don't believe that the universe will help you provide you with these resources, at least you know that you need re, to raise this money. And so in terms of what that budget is, I'm I created in my book Think Outside the Box Office. I created this concept of the new 50-50, which is 50% of your time, money, and energy should go into making the film, and 50% of your time, money, and energy should go into connecting that film to an audience, hence distribution and marketing. So that's not a hard and fast rule. You'll see the studios who will often spend more money. They'll make a film for $200 million and they'll spend $300 million on distribution and marketing. So that's even, say, 60-40 the other way. But with lots of films, if you're making a film for $50,000, you should be thinking about 50,000, 70,000, $100,000 for distribution and marketing. You'll be way better off than the filmmakers who aren't doing that. And if you make a film, if you're lucky enough to make a film for $2 million, you probably don't need $2 million to distribute and market the film, but you probably should be thinking about somewhere between 100,000, 300,000, 400,000, to distribute and market the film in the way that you want to do it. But that gets down to you can't really create a budget until you have a plan, because the plan is the basis of the budget. So the first thing to do is to create a distribution and marketing plan, know what elements you're going to have. Like, are you going to do a theatrical release, which is expensive, or not? Are you going to hire an impact producer, and for how long? Maybe you're hiring multiple impact producers if that's super important, in one covering one area, one covering another area. All these things will determine what the budget is, and that hence you need to create a plan before you create a budget, but that it's essential, I feel, to create that budget from the beginning.
Right. Well, let me ask you, do you do consultations with people as well?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. So we do consultations with people, and we also have the distribution lab. And so if you're interested, on our website are forms, and basically we meet with people every couple of weeks in these informal sessions where we explain how we work with people. And then you tell us about your projects and et cetera. And we get a sense of whether consulting is better, might be better for you, or the lab might be better for you. So there's two main options of working with us.
Wonderful. Okay, so you said the landscape is not great right now. What are the biggest challenges that filmmakers are facing today?
Money,
Great. Yes.
so it's tough because, you know, like, look, the PBS was gutted. They're still going. The strands, independent lens and POV are still functioning, but they don't have the resources they used to have. The streamers aren't really acquiring very much content at all. They're making it themselves. Generally, they acquire a few things and they're paying much less than they used to. That's making investors nervous about whether to invest. And it does cost money to make a film and cost money to release a film. And the avenues of revenue for those, depending on your film, they can be good or they can be challenging. So if your goal is money,
Yeah.
in my opinion, the key thing to do is to find an underserved audience that wants to be served by media. So find an audience that is dying to have their story told. So a case in point is the Librarians, which we worked on. We advised them, started as a consultation, and then we ended up doing a theatrical release. And this film is about school librarians and local librarians on the front lines of book banning in the United States, which is happening all over the place. And these librarians were desperate to have their story told and to be able to use that film as a tool to communicate what they're going through to other people. And those librarians became super spreaders of the and super organizers of the film in not all their communities, but many multiple communities across the country. So that leading to I think we're over 200 cities for the theatrical release. I think there were over 1,000 requests for community screenings. There's just a huge pent-up demand for this, to just give an example. And so that's, find an audience that's underserved and serve them well, is what I would suggest for financial success. Um,
That's motto. Yes, thank you. Well done. Well, what about the concept of audience building and why it's so central to everything you do at 8 and above? Let's get into that.
yeah, so I think, how we view audience building in general is to build an audience not just for one film, but to build an audience for your career. And even when I hear back from filmmakers, well, I make different kinds of films. Well, there's probably some through line, some creative through line or stylistic through line, or even your authentic self through line. Since you're the maker and you're making multiple projects, how can you engage people in your creative process, your ideas, and people, because people want to hear about why films are created. They want to know about creators, etc. So that's one of our key principles. The other is that no one else is going to develop this audience for you. There's no other companies out there. I mean, there are some, but you have to pay them. And there's no one really, there's no, dis, there's very, let's put it this way, I won't say none. There's very few distributors out there. As I said earlier, 99.9% of filmmakers aren't working with a distributor that is going to handle marketing for their film. So it's kind of on you to develop that audience. And so we talk about very specific ways of audience identification and different paths to engaging those audiences. And in general, we feel that it's a longish road, and that the earlier you start, the better off you are, at least in terms of identifying your audience. And if you can engage that audience in the making of the film, all the better for it. And, I'm talking to filmmakers, and being a filmmaker myself again, I understand how hard this is, and it's not necessarily a filmmaker's skill set. A lot of filmmakers are, not facile with social media. And so if that's the case, then bring someone on your team who is facile with social media. Many years ago, I was kind of like pilloried for saying, fire your DP and hire a PMD. Because if you don't like to do social media, if you don't like to do distribution and marketing, you as a filmmaker can probably shoot your own film, but if you can't do the social media and marketing, then maybe your resources should go into that, and maybe you should think about shooting your own film. Now, that's like, I make these statements to get people to think, right? So the new 50/50 is a way for you to think about, oh, I need to, plan for this. And same thing with that last statement. It's a way for you to think about that there's essentially a new kind of world out there, and the sooner filmmakers adjust to it, the better. And
Exactly.
the people who are more successful are the ones that adjust to it and plan for it.
Right. PMD. I remember. I love that. You're a producer, you're a marketing director, producer
Well, it's
marketing.
a producer of marketing and distribution is what the PMD stands for. There's also another term that's kind of come up lately, that Emily Best is promoting, along with this really brilliant person, Ivan Asquith, who we had as a guest in my distribution lab, called the community producer. So it's not someone, I find that a producer of marketing and distribution, there's only so many of us, to be honest. I work as one when we do releases, and it takes a very broad skill set of knowing marketing and knowing all aspects of distribution. And there are not that many people out there that know that. But a lot of the work is in audience building, and hence this idea of a community producer, which isn't just a impact producer, but for any kind of community, for any kind of film, to have this concept of a community producer, I think is a wonderful idea.
Exactly. Because this is what you're making the film for. this community. So that's only natural. But I had one filmmaker who was desperately trying to get people to join her social network because she had a potential distribution with a streamer, but she didn't have enough social network numbers. Her numbers weren't high enough. She had to raise it about 2,000 names. Uh,
Right.
right? So she didn't know that till she got all the way to the end of her film, and then it was a distraction. She wasn't marketing or producing the film anymore. She was audience building at the wrong time.
Yeah. Proper prior planning prevents perplexing problems. That was drill. I had a drill sergeant for my seventh grade algebra teacher and a former Marine drill sergeant, and he probably said that every day. So it's like, and it just, has stuck with me. Let's put it that way.
It's great. It's great. So tell us how you work with filmmakers through your counseling and
Yeah,
your.
so we do consultations, and that includes watching the film and then 2 hours of consultation, and then you can do more hours after that. Most filmmakers do. And then we also have a distribution lab. So one of the things in my background is when after I wrote the book, I did these 2-day workshops all over the world, literally on 6 continents. Didn't get to Antarctica and didn't get to teach the penguins or the scientists about distribution and marketing, but that's fine. Um, and then Ted Hope and I helped transform the IFP Rough Cut Lab into a finishing distribution and marketing lab, and I helped run that for 10 years. But that finished a few years ago. And then also, when the current crisis happened, a friend of mine encouraged me and said, maybe it's time to start a lab again. And I did. And it's a 6-month program. We meet every week. Every month, I'm in the sessions 3 times a month, and then the filmmakers meet on their own. And you're essentially learning how to do distribution and marketing under my mentorship for 6 months. And we also, so I do presentations, but then we also bring in guest experts from around the field, and these are usually at the highest level of independent film. So, for instance, the CEO of Kinema, Christy Marchese, CEO of Together Films, Sarah Moses, the former COO of Letterbox came in, David Larkin, etc. So you're not only learning from me, you're learning from these experts, and you're also learning from each other. And distribution and marketing can be a very lonely, even if you have a team of people with you, it can be a lonely endeavor. So it's great to have a cohort of other filmmakers that you're engaging with. And I think filmmakers are really eager for those cohorts these days. And what we found is that these cohorts kind of stayed together over time, even after the lab is over. Um,
Oh, nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what we've heard is that that cohort aspect is one of the most popular aspects to it, but also filmmakers come out of it, they say that they've had a mindset shift about not only distribution and marketing, but also of filmmaking.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So what makes Eight Above Distribution Lab unique compared to other training programs?
Well, I don't know of almost any other programs. And so I think it's kind of unique in the landscape. And the only one that I do know of is there's one that's more impact focused, and there's another one, but they only meet, my understanding, the other one only meets once a month. And so we meet every week, which I feel is, pretty important. Plus, in addition to the meetings, there's a whole trove of resources online. So my past presentations, all the guests that have come through their presentations and interactions with the filmmakers, plus a lot of documentation. So there's sample budgets, there's sample, even a form of how to, the best practices of how to gain email addresses at screenings. Screenings toolkits, sample press kits, sample press releases, etc. Those are all available in the back end.
Oh, screening toolkit samples. This is great.
Yeah.
Really wonderful. Okay. I want to talk about your Substack because it's the most enjoyable thing. It's full of guidance. You get to the nitty gritty. You don't give us this wide area. You hone in on important things. Guidance is what I'm looking for, and it's always there. And I sincerely thank you for offering this free 6 month subscription to your Substack because this includes valuable case studies and tools that I'm sure you won't find anywhere. So I want to tell the audience to be sure and sign up for that. And there is a code, which is HEART, HEART 6, and it's all lowercase before May 14th. So thank you, Jon, for that.
Uh, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I enjoy doing it, and it's, um, I think it serves. What's interesting, kind of what we do is a little bit of a virtuous circle. So we do releases, and so we experiment with different things during the releases. Then we do case studies about it. It also informs other things that I write about on the Substack, as well as also in what we teach in the distribution lab. So everything kind of like the consulting, the distribution lab, the Substack, and the releases that we do all kind of feed into each other. And I think we're pretty unique in that area. I don't know anyone who's simultaneously doing releases and also teaching distribution marketing as avidly as we do.
I agree totally. So you have uh, you've been working with the industry, and so I wanted to find out more about this Black Block the Merger campaign and matters.
Yeah, yeah. So about a year and a quarter ago, or just about a year ago, me and a few other people started an organization called the Future Film Coalition, which is an organization to advocate for the interests of independent film. Because we realized that, as I mentioned, the media conglomeration that's been going on has been very damaging to our field and ecosystem, plus many other things that are damaging to our ecosystem and making it more difficult for filmmakers to survive. And what we realized was that it wasn't just techniques, it wasn't bad films, it wasn't anything else. That is it was that there were systemic structural issues within our economy which were hampering us. And so we banded together to create an organization to advocate for independent film, but across the landscape. So we have 6 branches. So there's a filmmaker branch, there's a distributor branch, there's an exhibitor branch, so festivals and theaters. There's a communications and media branch, so for publicists, impact producers, social media, journalists, etc. There's also a branch for artist support organizations such as Gotham and IDA, et cetera. We have, I think 60 organizations that are part of our organization now. And then we also have an at-large branch for funders and lawyers and agents and managers and academics. And actually today we are launching our membership campaign. There are guidelines for membership. You have to have experience within the field. But if you go to futurefilmcoalition.org, there's a membership form and you can sign up to or apply to be a member. And then it goes through an approval process. So we did actually, a campaign last year where we helped advocate for and achieve an independent film carve out in the increased California film tax credit. But the biggest campaign that we've been a part of and we actually initiated, was the Block the Merger campaign to try to stop the merger between Paramount and Warner Brothers. And part of what our industry is suffering is from decades of consolidation, where several now large corporations have basically vacuumed up or bought and and then eliminated former thriving independent distributors, such as New Line Cinema was bought by Time Warner and then bought by Warner Brothers, and basically is now their library is part of Warner Brothers, but they don't really exist anymore. And New Line Cinema was a thriving independent distributor that would distribute lots of independent content and provided a lot of revenue and great releases for independent films. And that doesn't exist. That company doesn't exist anymore. And there are very, very few companies now that can exist in the current landscape. Um, I sometimes joke that I started or I helped start the Future Film Coalition to put myself out of a job. So, because if we had a thriving ecosystem for independent film, people wouldn't need me as much. So please put me out of a job. So the Block the Merger campaign also has a petition that you can sign, and we encourage people to sign it. It's probably up to 5,000 signatures now, but the more the merrier. And it has quite a number of prominent people who have signed on to it, from Damon Lindelof to Gina Gershon to many people. I'm blanking on the names, but Mark Ruffalo, and et cetera, who's one of our biggest proponents and of the Block the Merger campaign. And so please sign that. And you can get that. You can also find the petition on Future Film Coalition. But you can also go straight, frankly, you can go straight to blockthemerger.com. Also on blockthemerger.com, not to take up too much time with this, if you have a story about how you have been affected by media consolidation, meaning, so even if you're, not in, even if you're, say you were a grip on TV shows being produced in Los Angeles, and now you're out of work, and part of the reason you're out of work is because the kinds of productions aren't being made in Los Angeles anymore because of whatever variety of reasons. We are collecting stories and this is what we've been told, is that this is a very important element of the Block the Merger campaign, is to hear stories from people actually in the industry of how they've been affected by media consolidation. And so if you're a theater owner and you are suffering under the restrictions that the studios place on you in terms of the kind of content that you have to show if you want this movie, then you have to hold it over for a whole month. And if you want this one movie, then you also have to program these three other terrible movies. And so that makes it hard for you to function as an independent theater. Those kinds of stories, the full range of stories of how media consolidation has infected our industry are important. So if you want to help in the campaign, the first thing is to sign the petition. Second thing is if you have a story, and also to spread the word about the petition. And the second thing is if you have a compelling story about how you've been affected, is to write that up. And you're welcome to write it up anonymously if you don't want to leave your name.
Yes, stories are the best thing we have because we are storytellers.
I was just going to say that. Yes. Yeah.
So we need that. Okay, so let's get into release strategies. What are some of the most effective theatrical or hybrid release strategies that you're seeing right now? This is really important. How do you get people out of their homes and into the theater?
Yeah, I mean that one of our clients coined what we do call let me just rephrase that. One of our clients coined what we do as impact event theatrical. And we find each of those elements, the two elements of impact and event are very important. So impact in terms of engaging audiences in through organizations and through interest groups to come out to the theater. So you're not just, yes, publicity is important. Yes, organic social and paid social are important. But what we found is that organizational partnerships is one of the strongest, if not the strongest way to get butts in seats. And it's not applicable to all films. It's a little bit more applicable to documentaries, but I've had filmmakers in the lab. We're going to be doing a case study on the Substack next week from one of the filmmakers in the lab and who made a film about a 15th century English nun and how she's reaching out to organizations and groups to get them into theaters. And then the other essential component, in my opinion, is to eventize your theatrical release. And even if you're doing community screenings, that's what really helps get people out into theaters is if there's an event component. And so this could be anything from, the filmmaker or the subject being present, panel discussions with community groups, but you can even do, Sandy Dubowski would do soul spas in cities where he went, which weren't even part of the theater, but as promotion, as part of a promotion, but also it was part of his brand and also something that he loved to do is to bring people together and engage in spiritual discussion and ritual. The encampments, for instance, would, after their screenings, would bring people to a Palestinian restaurant and have dinner to have discussions. So it's basically sky's the limit in terms of what you can potentially do. One of the more famous examples recently is the film Eno, where every time that film is shown, it's a different version of the film. Now, most filmmakers can't do that, but it's a brilliant way of eventizing the theatrical experience. So those are what I would say tried and true ways. And that's what we did on the Librarians. And I kind of had to convince them to try this one night events. It also, the other aspect of eventizing and the other way to kind of be successful is to focus on a one night event, because that time scarcity also makes it so that people feel compelled to get out of the house. It's like it's not going to be available any other way. It's not available every day, for a week or 2 weeks. It's only available one night. And so what we had on the Librarians is where 47 cities, one night events sold out weeks in advance and turned into week-long runs, because it showed the popularity and it created that demand. That scarcity created the demand for the screenings. And then I would say also scarcity is a technique that filmmakers are savvily using throughout their releases. So for instance, Sandy with Sabbath Queen, he's doing in-person events he's into his second year. He's not putting it online. There's many filmmakers who are not putting their films online, not putting it on what's called transactional video on demand, because A, they enjoy the experience with audiences in person, but B, they find that there's more revenue to be had from these in-person screenings than you can often get in transactional video on demand. There's certain, films that are kind of unicorns that can do both, such as Hundreds of Beavers, which has such a crazy intense fan base that even after they went on video on demand, there was still demand for screenings, and they're still doing in-theater screenings. It's crazy how well that film is doing. But that's an outlier. And so you have to kind of be strategic about how you're windowing out these various rights. Another example that I'm using in my presentations is this, and we actually have a case study on my Substack with a film 1946. And so they did a very short theatrical release. Then they did these home screenings and house party screenings. And then they eventually went on video on demand onto Amazon and iTunes, but they're still doing screenings all around the world, to be honest. It's like it's amazing. They're going to Africa next year. And so they're on video on demand. They do educational and on-demand screenings from their website, but they're still doing these campaigns literally all around the world in person. So it's a matter of being very creative and intentional about the windowing and how that is going to what's going to essentially be the best to meet your goals. And so essentially, it's coming up with a strategy. And so for me to create a strategy, and I've written about this in my Substack and I talk about this a lot, is that there's these 8 points that I feel are essential to creating a distribution and marketing strategy. I'm looking at the clock. I actually have to go in a couple of minutes for the distribution lab. And so the first is knowing what your goal is. The second is understanding your film and is it as good as it can be? And also, what is the brand of your film and how does that brand of the film relate to your film brand? Third is who is your audience? And not only the audience niches, but what are the core audiences within each of those audience niches? The fourth is how are you going to reach that audience? And so I break that down into what I call owned media or what's known as owned media. It's the media that you fully control, like your website, your email list, the extra content that you create, all the marketing materials. And then secondly, shared media, which is partnerships with organizations, partnerships with influencers, and also organic social. Then earned media, which is traditional press, but as important these days is audience reviews. And then last is paid media, which is like paid advertising. So that's four. Then the fifth is what are the distribution channels that are available for you and how do you work those and what makes the most sense for your film? So I break those down into event theatrical, into digital, into educational, and into merchandise, those four main categories. Then sixth is how do you window those rights in relationship to each other? Number seven, what are the resources that you have or that you need to raise in terms of time and money to execute that release? And then how does all of this influence and relate to your entire career as a filmmaker? And so from those 8 steps, and you can there's a Substack this is all written out in my Substack. There's a post about these 8 steps, so don't worry about writing all this down, but using those 8 steps to create your distribution and marketing plan. And that's essentially what we do in the consultations, but it's also we go through those 8 steps in the distribution lab and actually you're actually presenting on these different things, on these different attributes throughout the course of the distribution lab as you create your own plan. But you can also be in distribution when you're in the lab. So we take the stages that you can be everything from development or script stage all the way through the beginnings of your festival release. I would say you can be at any stage in that to be part of the lab.
That's excellent. For filmmakers just starting out, what are the biggest mistakes you see and how could they do it differently?
Is to not, I'll just summarize, to not think about distribution and marketing when they're making their films or even ideating their films. And to not make a distribution and marketing plan and not to budget for it. That's the hugest mistake, is to have blinders on about this essential component. And then I would say the other thing, it's not really a mistake, but be aware of the landscape and where it's at. And, you know, I'd say if you apply to be a member of the FFC and help us try to change it.
Okay, that's brilliant, Jon. Thank you. This has been an incredibly insightful interview. Your knowledge, your passion for helping filmmakers navigate distribution. And thank you everyone for listening. And don't forget that Jon is offering a free 6-month subscription to his Substack, which includes valuable case studies and tools that you won't find anywhere else. So sign up using the code HEART6 before May 14th. And if you're serious about getting your film seen and building a real audience, Jon's work is essential. So thank you for joining us today on the Art of Film Funding podcast. I'm Carol Dean with Claire Papin with the nonprofit From the Heart Productions, where we've been supporting filmmakers with education and guidance in film funding. We're wishing you success in getting your films funded, finished, and distributed. So join us next week for more insightful information. Remember, you are the magic. Hollywood needs you. Thank you for joining us. Claire, thank you. And Jon, it was an honor to learn all this. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Carol, and thank you, Claire. Really appreciate it. As you can see, I really enjoy talking about this
Yeah,
forever.
wherever your heart is in it. I'm so happy about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, in its second edition, Carol Dean's popular book, The Art of Film Funding, has 12 new chapters to cover all areas of film financing and how to avoid expensive pitfalls. Learn how to start with an idea and end with a trailer, how to make an ask for money, create your story structure and your trailer, legal advice, fair use, successful crowdfunding, how to ask for music rights, and what insurance you can't shoot without. Available on Amazon under Carol Dean and at FromTheHeartProductions.com. I want to remind our listeners that David Raiklin is a brilliant and talented award-winning musician who scores films and can compose music for a trio or for a full orchestra. David is a very good friend to the independent filmmaker and comes highly recommended by From the Heart Productions. If you need music to help tell your story, please contact him at davidraiklin.com. That's David, RAIKLEN.com. And Carol and I want to thank you for tuning in to The Art of Film Funding. Please visit our website at FromTheHeartProductions.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Good luck with your films, everyone.